The fire-eyed beast. It began with the message, a lone text that arrived at exactly 11:11 p.m. The time stuck with me, as did the words. Hollow Pine Trail. Midnight. Don't be late. I stared at the screen for a long time, the blue light casting an eerie glow over my face in the otherwise pitch-black room. The sender was a number I didn't recognize, and there was no name attached. My first instinct was to ignore it. Pranks weren't uncommon, and I wasn't about to indulge some stranger's idea of a joke. But there was something off about the message. It wasn't just the words. It was how they felt, almost like they were alive. The letters seemed to burrow into my brain, making me think of the forest trail just outside of town. Hollow Pine wasn't a place people went to at night. It was remote, the kind of spot only locals knew about, and even then most avoided it. There were stories, of course, whispers of strange sightings, disappearances, fires that burned with no source, all chalked up to tall tales told by bored teenagers. Still, something gnawed at me. I told myself I was just curious, that this was nothing more than a spur-of-the-moment decision. But deep down, I knew better. That text felt like it had been written just for me. By the time I got to the car, it was 11:40 p.m. The drive to Hollow Pine Trail was about 20 minutes, enough time to reconsider what I was doing. The road was empty, the headlights cutting through a dense fog that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Even with the windows up, I could feel the air change, colder and heavier, pressing against the car like a weight. The entrance to the trail came into view, marked by a weathered wooden sign. The letters, once neatly painted, were faded and cracked. There was no one else around. No cars, no lights, nothing but the sound of the engine idling and the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. I killed the engine and stepped out, the night swallowing me whole. My phone buzzed again. Don't stop. Keep walking. The message sent a shiver down my spine. Whoever was sending these knew I was here. I looked around, scanning the tree line for any sign of movement, but there was only darkness. My feet moved before my brain could catch up, one step at a time into the trail. The forest was silent, unnaturally so. There were no chirping crickets, no rustling animals, just the sound of my boots crunching against the dirt path. The deeper I went, the darker it became, as if the trees were conspiring to block out even the faintest hint of starlight. Then came the smell. It was faint at first, a hint of something acrid and sharp, like burnt wood. I stopped, sniffing the air. It grew stronger with each step, mingling with the earthy scent of moss and decaying leaves. The trail twisted ahead, disappearing into a dense thicket, and for a moment I hesitated. That's when I saw it, a faint glow up ahead. At first I thought it might be a campfire, though there was no warmth, no flicker of flames. The glow was steady, pulsating faintly like the ember of a dying cigarette. It painted the surrounding trees in shades of deep orange and red, casting long, skeletal shadows that seemed to move even when I didn't. I moved closer, compelled by some unseen force. The smell of burning grew stronger, and the air felt heavier, like it was thickening with each step. My heart was pounding now, not just from fear, but from something deeper, something primal. The glow came from the ground. There, pressed into the dirt of the trail, was a single footprint. It was massive, at least 3 times the size of my own, and it glowed faintly with a heat that made the air shimmer above it. The edges were sharp, almost claw-like, and as I knelt to examine it, the smell of burning intensified. Another text buzzed in my pocket. Keep going. I whipped my head around, the phone nearly slipping from my sweaty hand. The forest was still empty, or so it seemed, but the sensation of being watched was unbearable, like 100 unseen eyes were tracking my every move. I looked back at the footprint. There were more now, a trail of them leading deeper into the woods. The rational part of my brain screamed at me to turn back, to leave while I still could, but my legs refused to listen. I followed the glowing prints, each one seeming to burn brighter as I got closer. The trail wound deeper into the heart of the forest, where the trees grew gnarled and twisted, their branches forming grotesque shapes against the black sky. My flashlight flickered, then died completely, leaving me in near total darkness. The only light came from the footprints, casting an otherworldly glow that painted the forest in hues of orange and crimson. And then I heard it. It was faint at first, like a whisper carried on the wind, but it grew louder with each step. It wasn't words, not exactly, more like a low, guttural growl that reverberated through my chest. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. The glow of the footprints led me to a clearing. At its center stood something that stopped me cold. It was a totem, carved from a single massive tree trunk. The wood was blackened, charred as if it had been struck by lightning, but the surface was etched with symbols I couldn't understand. They twisted and writhed in the dim light, almost as if they were alive. Surrounding the totem were bones, hundreds of them, scattered in a haphazard circle. Some were small, animal-like, but others were unmistakably human. The growling grew louder. I spun around, and that's when I saw them. Two burning eyes glowing like twin coals in the darkness, unblinking and fixed on me. They were far apart, impossibly so, and yet they moved closer together as the shadow behind them shifted. The creature was massive, its form indistinct but undeniably there, like a void swallowing all light. The air grew suffocatingly hot, the smell of burning wood and flesh so strong it made my eyes water. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the edge of the clearing. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't dare look at it. The creature moved closer, the ground beneath it scorching with every step. The eyes never blinked. And then it spoke, not with words but with the growl that now seemed to form shapes in my mind. The meaning was clear. You were invited. Now you will stay. The narrative builds on suspense, immersing the reader in a world of dread where the forest itself seems alive with malevolence. The encounter with the glowing footprints and the totem deepens the mystery, setting the stage for the horrific confrontation in the next part. I stood frozen, unable to tear my gaze from the glowing eyes piercing the darkness. They moved closer, swaying ever so slightly, like an animal stalking prey. My breath came in shallow gasps, each inhale bringing with it the suffocating stench of burning wood and scorched earth. The totem behind me pulsed faintly, its carving seeming to shift and ripple under the glow of the creature's eyes. The air was thick, like I was breathing in ash, and I could feel the heat radiating from the beast's presence, even though it hadn't fully emerged from the shadows. It didn't need to. The eyes alone were enough to paralyze me with fear. They were endless, bottomless pits of flame that seemed to stare into the very core of my being. My legs screamed at me to run, to move, but the forest had grown eerily silent. Even the ground beneath me seemed to hold me in place. And then it spoke again. Not in words, but in a low, guttural vibration that reverberated through my chest. The meaning was clear, though I couldn't explain how I understood. You should not have come. The ground beneath me cracked with a faint hiss, smoke curling upward from the glowing footprints the beast left behind. The whispers I had heard earlier returned, louder now, a cacophony of voices overlapping and swirling around me. They weren't human. Some were guttural and snarling, others high-pitched and wailing. They filled my head, drowning out any coherent thought. My phone buzzed again, jolting me just enough to break the trance. I fumbled it out of my... I could hear the beast behind me now, its massive form crashing through the trees, each step accompanied by a low, resonating growl. The path twisted and turned, but I barely noticed. My only focus was on escaping, though the oppressive heat made every breath feel like I was inhaling fire. Branches clawed at my face and arms as I stumbled forward, the shadows around me seeming to twist and reach out, trying to pull me back. Then, the forest began to change. The trees grew closer together, their trunks charred and blackened. The ground beneath me turned to ash, soft and crumbling under my weight. The air was no longer cold. It was blistering, and the faint glow of firelight flickered through the gaps in the trees. I tripped over something and fell hard, the impact knocking the wind out of me. Gasping for air, I turned to see what had caught my foot. It was a skeleton, half buried in the ash, its empty socket staring up at me accusingly. The whispers rose to a deafening roar, and I looked up just in time to see the beast standing at the edge of the clearing, its burning eyes locked onto mine. This time, it fully stepped into the light, and I wished it hadn't. Its body was a nightmare, a mass of blackened flesh and molten cracks that oozed with glowing embers. Smoke curled from its limbs, and its claws were impossibly long, tipped with fire that dripped onto the ground, igniting small flames wherever it stepped. Its face was a skull, hollow and charred, the sockets glowing with the same unblinking fire that had haunted me from the start. It didn't move toward me. It didn't need to. Its presence alone was suffocating, the heat so intense I felt my skin begin to burn. And then, in the midst of the chaos, I noticed something I hadn't before. The totem. It stood at the center of the clearing, untouched by the flames, its symbols glowing faintly. The whispers seemed to emanate from it, growing louder and more chaotic as the beast approached. I didn't know why, but I felt drawn to it. My hands trembled as I crawled toward the totem, the ash beneath me scorching my palms. The whispers were maddening now, an unrelenting torrent of voices that made my head feel like it was about to split open. Behind me, the beast let out a roar that shook the ground. But I didn't stop. The symbols on the totem shifted and twisted, almost as if they were alive. They pulsed with a faint, otherworldly glow, drawing me closer. I reached out, my fingertips brushing against the charred wood, and the whispers abruptly stopped. The silence was deafening. I turned to see the beast standing at the edge of the clearing, its burning eyes fixed on the totem. For the first time, it hesitated. The ground beneath it cracked and hissed, flames licking at its claws, but it didn't move closer. The totem was a barrier. I didn't understand why, but I knew I had to do something, anything, to use it. My gaze fell to the base of the totem, where a small pile of ashes and bones rested. Among them was a knife, its blade blackened but still sharp. I grabbed it without thinking. The moment my fingers closed around the hilt, the whispers returned, louder than ever. This time, they weren't chaotic. They were clear, a single voice rising above the rest. Cut! The beast roared again, its massive form shaking with rage, but it still didn't cross the invisible boundary around the totem. I looked down at the knife, then at my hand. The voice repeated, more insistent. Cut! I didn't understand, but there was no time to think. My instincts took over, and I pressed the blade to my palm, drawing it across the skin in one swift motion. Blood welled up, dark and glistening in the firelight, and I pressed my hand against the totem. The reaction was immediate. The totem erupted in flames, the symbols glowing so brightly I had to shield my eyes. The beast let out a deafening roar, its form writhing and distorting as if the fire were consuming it from within. The ground beneath it cracked open, flames erupting in violent bursts, and the air was filled with the acrid stench of burning flesh. I stumbled back, my vision blurred by the intense light. The whispers rose to a fever pitch, then stopped abruptly as the totem's flames died down. When I opened my eyes, the beast was gone. The clearing was silent, the oppressive heat replaced by an eerie stillness. The totem stood untouched, its carvings now faint and lifeless. I staggered to my feet, my body trembling from exhaustion and fear. The forest around me was dark once more, the trees looming silently as if nothing had happened. But as I turned to leave, a single glowing footprint appeared in the ash behind me. The beast wasn't gone. It was waiting. The forest swallowed me in silence as I stumbled back toward the trailhead, my legs heavy and trembling with every step. The cool air should have been a relief after the suffocating heat of the clearing, but it wasn't. It carried a biting chill that wormed its way under my skin, making the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. I gripped my bleeding palm, the searing pain grounding me in the moment. My mind raced, replaying what I'd seen, What I'd done. The glowing eyes, the unholy heat, the whispers that still seemed to echo faintly in my ears. It all felt too real to dismiss as a nightmare. Yet every part of me wanted to pretend it wasn't. The trail stretched endlessly ahead, each shadow twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to move when I wasn't looking. I kept my gaze fixed forward, refusing to glance over my shoulder, though the sensation of being watched grew stronger with every step. Something was following me. I told myself it was my imagination, that my mind was playing tricks on me after the encounter with the beast. But then I saw it again. A faint glow, barely visible through the dense trees. It wasn't in front of me. It was behind, the glowing footprint. I stopped, my breath catching in my throat. The light pulsed faintly, like an ember refusing to die. My hand throbbed, and I looked down at the crude cut I'd made. The blood had dried around the edges, but the skin beneath the wound glowed faintly, matching the fiery print in the dirt. The whispers returned, soft at first, just a hint of sound at the edge of my hearing. They weren't chaotic this time. They were deliberate, rhythmic, as if counting down to something. I started running. The trail warped around me, the trees twisting and leaning as if alive, their branches reaching out to claw at my face and arms. The forest floor shifted beneath my feet, turning soft and unstable, and I stumbled more than once, scraping my knees on the jagged roots jutting out of the ground. The glowing print appeared again, now ahead of me. My heart sank as I realized the trail wasn't leading me out. It was looping back toward the clearing. The whispers grew louder, overlapping into a chorus that drowned out my thoughts. "You cannot leave." The voice boomed in my mind, deafening and final. I skidded to a halt as the trail opened back into the clearing. The totem still stood in the center, its carvings faint but pulsating softly with a dim, crimson light. The air was thick with ash and smoke, swirling in faint patterns that seemed almost humanoid. And then I saw them. Figures emerged from the trees, their shapes distorted and flickering like dying flames. They moved slowly, their forms shrouded in smoke, but their eyes, oh, their eyes, burned with the same unblinking fire as the beasts. They surrounded me, their movements deliberate and silent. Each step they took left a glowing footprint in the ash, forming a perfect circle around the totem. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I couldn't move. My body was frozen, rooted to the spot as the air grew heavier, hotter. The totem flared to life, the carvings glowing brightly as the figures raised their hands in unison. The whispers reached a crescendo, their meanings merging into a single, horrifying truth. "You are marked." I didn't understand until I looked down at my palm. The cut had widened, the glow beneath it growing brighter, spreading up my arm in thin, fiery tendrils. My skin burned, the heat unbearable, and I let out a scream that was swallowed by the deafening roar of the totem. The figures moved closer, their eyes burning holes into me. The totem pulsed, its light flickering wildly as the ground beneath it cracked and splintered. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. With every ounce of strength I had left, I bolted, pushing past the figures. They didn't stop me, didn't chase me, but I could feel their eyes on me, burning into my back as I ran. I didn't stop until I saw the faint glow of the street lamp marking the trailhead. The car was still there, a beacon of normalcy in the nightmare I just escaped. I drove home in silence, the dark road stretching endlessly before me. Weeks have passed since that night, but the nightmare hasn't ended. The cut on my hand refuses to heal, the fiery tendrils now spreading across my chest. The whispers follow me everywhere, soft, insistent, never ceasing. And at night, when I close my eyes, I see them. The burning figures, the pulsing totem, and the unblinking eyes of the beast. I know it's not over. The forest hasn't let me go. Not really. The final chapter leaves the protagonist alive, but irrevocably changed, trapped in a lingering horror that suggests the beast's curse is far from broken. The forest, its whispers and the glowing marks ensure the story ends on a chilling, unsettling note.